Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm assuming primarily delegates. It is a pleasure to be able to speak to you this evening and to have a special guest, Joseph Bortka. So as you should know, hopefully, based on the information that was sent out to you, there is a proposal to introduce some resolutions to the platform of the Republican Party. We hope that this is going to be an active Q&A session. We sent out a phone number that you can text. My name is Dion Bergeron, and I'm the host. And I'm going to be bringing on our very special guest in just a moment. But I did want to say, even if you're not a delegate or even if you're not necessarily in favor of these particular resolutions, I think it's critically important for us as delegates and as members of the Republican Party to A, understand what our party stands for, and B, have the ability to hold that party accountable for the variance. In other words, for not living up to the ideals that we have set for it as a party. And this will go a long way towards doing so. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the wording, if you don't necessarily agree with these resolutions, it's a process to allow delegates to conduct a floor vote, whether or not you say yes or no. My hope is for healthy debate on the issue. And I'm very much in favor of discussing the merits or not of a particular thing. But without further ado, Joseph Bortka, he's running for state rep in District 100. But more importantly, at least for tonight's show, is he's kind of the face. He's, as he's said on many occasions, he's not the sole author. He's part of a group of people that are involved with doing this, but he's kind of become the face of it. And so here he is. Welcome.
Hi, Dion. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. I'm glad you were able to join us. So as we sent out to the delegates, there's this huge deal going on in the party, and I think you have a better understanding of it than most. And maybe you can kind of give us just a really quick synopsis of what you're hoping to achieve.
Sure. Well, I would say that there's a fundamental disagreement within the party around what the purpose of the Republican Party should be. And really that boils down to two camps. One side believes that the purpose of the party is to win elections, get their friends elected, and then maybe ask them for a favor once in a while. But other than that, stay pretty hands off. And then there's another group of people that believe that you giving your vote to your representatives forms a relationship, almost a contract. When you give your support through the party, that this person that you're working to get elected, who runs as a Republican, has promised to uphold values that the Republican Party supports. And so the fundamental disagreement there is in how much say the party should have over the policies that get pushed by party members within the legislature and other branches of government.
Okay. I think that kind of goes to the heart of a lot of people's frustration with the entire political process, really, but specifically the Republican Party here in Indiana. It's supposed to represent conservative leadership and fiscal responsibility and et cetera, et cetera. And at least in the recent, actually pretty much the entire time the Republican Party has been in control, I believe we're failing to live up to the ideals that the party has set forth.
I completely agree with that. And I mean, just for example, look at the budget. I mean, even in Republican leadership, the budget just keeps going up. I mean, it keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. So,
Sure,
you
sure.
know,
And so do taxes.
yep. Many people just see, you know, the Republican Party as we're the Democrats from 20 years ago, and that's not where we want to be. We need to be the trendsetters, not the trend followers.
I agree. I agree with you 100% on these things. So, delegates, those of you watching, we sent out a phone number. If you're not comfortable commenting live to ask your questions, you can text the number. Your name will not be revealed. Your number will not be revealed. Their political persecution is very, very real. And there are, my understanding is there have been delegates that have been threatened, depending on the way that you vote on this upcoming convention, and that is completely unacceptable. And that therein lies one of the problems, in my opinion, with today's party, at least here in Indiana. So what can we do about that? You're in the process of fixing that.
So this might actually be a good time to bring up the motion on the election procedures. Because that really cuts to the core of what you're talking about, especially when it comes to people being threatened.
Sure.
Which I've heard those rumors too. People are getting strong armed.
Yep.
And it's very one-sided. It's one side that's doing it. And I'm sure you delegates that are paying attention know who it is, because you've probably been getting it too.
Right.
Especially if you're in elected office. But so there's the way that the elections have been conducted in the past is by machine. Now the machines are the kind where they print off a paper ballot and then you put it into an accounting machine and it counts it. So you do have a physical verified copy. It's not just entirely electronic, which is better than the alternative. But in previous years, in order to verify that you haven't voted too many times, what they would do is they take a hole punch and punch the side of your credential card that says you're a delegate and you're certified to vote in the election. But this year, they've decided to start using an electronic system with a barcode on each credential that says that what they claim it does is they scan the barcode, it goes over to their computer poll book, and then they mark your name as you voted on the electronics. And the problem that a lot of people have with it is, well, if you know anything about computers, well, you'll know that stuff can go on behind the scenes. Even if it's presenting one thing, you can have a program do anything you want behind the scenes if you know what you're doing. Right. So the concern isn't that it would necessarily manipulate votes in the scanning part, but that it would compromise the anonymity of the votes. And for some people, that's not going to change who they're going to vote for. But there's certainly especially with the threats that I've heard are going around. If there's people that are undecided and they feel like it could hurt their future careers, perhaps, if they vote the wrong way, and they feel like their vote is not anonymous and somebody is tracking who's voting who, just because there might be that chance, that could affect how they vote. And that's kind of my input on it. I don't know that there's going to be any attempt to manipulate votes overtly, but my biggest concern with a system that isn't as clear in how it operates is that it might be a psychological play, so to speak.
Right. Not only that, as we know, and I'm simply presenting information here. I'm not giving an opinion on this. These are simply facts. HRCC are the purse strings of the House Republican, basically the campaign finance. It's a massive deal. If you don't know what HRCC is, House Republican Campaign Committee, by all means, look them up. But they spent a vast amount of money to get Julie McGuire elected to her House race, and now she's going on to lieutenant governor. I like to ask a lot of questions. One of the questions is, well, what does that investment do? And what, assuming if they want you to vote for Julie McGuire and you don't, and they can tell that you don't, what does that do to your opportunity to obtain some of that green cash to help you get elected? They're just questions. The answers are really up to you. But Jim O'Rourke says at 2022 convention, there was a similar push. One item was personal medical decisions as a quick hit topic. Governor Holcomb was supposed to show, but it got contentious. It did indeed. And he said on Saturday when it was raised, it was quickly squashed by the stage holders, if you catch the inference. Absolutely, it was. I was there. I saw it. But as I spoke, we had Mr. Bortka on the show previously, but his time was extremely limited. And we talked about it briefly there. The problem was because of the location, because of the acoustics, because of everything. I had no idea what was even happening until after everything was over and people had been shouted down and gavelled and etc. So you're looking to change basically the way that this entire thing works, right?
Well, so I'm not really trying to change the way that it's supposed to work. It's actually this is how conventions operate in many places, and in fact, historically and around the country, other state parties have resolutions and they have floor debates and they do all of these things that we're trying to get in Indiana. Ours has just in the past, at least in the recent past, been more of a performance. And what we believe, us who are working on this, is that the convention is it's the place where all the Republicans from the state get together once every 2 years, and we are supposed to be directing the vision and the mission of the party. So, interesting fact here that I think we brought up last time, the party rules, which govern the entire procedures and process of the Republican Party, the first one actually, which delegates authority to the state committee to make rules, says that the state committee is subject to the Republican convention when duly assembled, which actually means that the convention is the highest governing body in the party. So if you're a delegate, you are a member of the highest authority-bearing governing body of the Republican Party. And the people in the state committee obviously don't want you to know that because they like making the decisions and not having much pushback from the us rabble. And I mean, there's reasons why you got to be careful in picking your battles and what you present to the convention, because it can get pretty chaotic when you have a room full of 1,800 people trying to all get different things done. But you should understand the power that you actually have. That confers powers of being involved in debate. That confers powers of, you have certain rights to be heard in the assembly. And these really come to a head when they pass the rules. So the rules of the convention are separate from the other rules that already exist for the party. And the standing rules are supposed to narrowly focus the mission and objectives of the convention. And so what they're supposed to do is focus everything on normal business and make sure that things don't distract everybody from the purpose, from emotions that would be somewhat off topic, things that most people don't believe are of great importance. But one of the problems is this has gone on for so long without much debate, other than a few times in recent history, such as in 2018 when they tried to remove biblical marriage from the platform. That was an example where they there were some people that tried to force to stop them from doing that. And so, but the general public doesn't really understand the procedures that are necessary to do these things, and that's they don't really do a great job of educating people in these things. And my argument to a lot of these people in the state party is that this is an opportunity for us to be raising up and training our future leaders, our future people who are going to be going to elected office. There's a few people which I've talked to that are going to be speaking, Lord willing, if we can get these on the floor and debated, that I think are going to really shine in this environment. And I think that some of these people are one day going to be in elected office. And I think the people in the state party should be using this opportunity as well to give our people chances to be put under these kinds of pressures, because what we're really advocating for is just the same kind of procedure of debate that you would see in the legislature or any local government body. So yeah.
I think that as a concept, absolutely, it's sound. So a couple of questions that I have. First of all, the Rules Committee meets on Friday. Is that open to all delegates?
All delegates can come to the Rules Committee. And if this stuff is something you care about, if you care about stopping the scanning of your credentials as a means of a poll book, and if you care about having a debate on the floor, then you should come and show your support at 3:30 in room 125 at
will be there.
The Rules Committee meeting. And did I explain what the purpose of the Rules Committee is yet?
Just to set the basically the agenda and how it's going to function, right?
Yep. Yeah. So they craft the rules of the convention, which I was just discussing. But it's important to note that in parliamentary law, the committees are only an organ of the main body, so to speak. You want to think of the convention as a body, just like you have lots of brain cells in your brain. Well, you as individuals, as delegates, are the brain cells of the organization. I have a biology degree, in case you couldn't tell.
There you go. But I think that's an excellent way to reference it. And, one of the things that keeps getting brought up is, well, how do we hold our politicians accountable? How do we hold them accountable? And I think this is probably one of the best ways that I've seen, because let's face it, it's not difficult in Indiana to run as a Republican. You have either two primary votes, or you get a letter from a chairman who wants you to get elected. It's just that simple. So even if you voted Democrat your whole life, you get a chairman letter, boom, you're on the ballot, you get elected as a Republican. What are you held to other than the voters? I think that potentially this could give a guideline to what we expect from our Republican lawmakers.
Absolutely. And particularly, there's, especially in Indiana, and if you're a conservative and you pay attention to the legislature, you'll notice that there are a lot of the legislators that are in leadership tend to be from, and the people in the state party tend to be more close to the center of the state, close to Indianapolis, in the orbit of Indianapolis. Yeah. And that tends to have more moderate Republicans. So if you're if you don't believe that the state is as conservative as it could be and as it should be, well, part of the problem is because when our legislators go into the state house, a lot of decisions are made behind the scenes in the caucus meetings where, they're secret meetings. They don't have to be open to the public, and it's within the party. And so there's pressure to protect more moderate Republicans in competitive districts, which, fair enough, that is an important thing to be doing. But
sure,
sometimes it can hamstring the attempts to get more conservative policy passed. And so what a resolution like some of the ones we're proposing are doing is we're giving our legislators a club to go back into those secret caucus meetings and be able to say, hey, look at this. All these people that donate to you, that knock your doors for you, that help you during session, these people, this is what these people want. And so what we're trying to really do is the few legislators that, are willing to stand up and say these things in the private meetings, we're trying to give them ammunition. We're trying to send reinforcements, so to speak. So
Right.
this is very important in that.
Well, one thing that whether you know or not, I'm gonna inform you. So one of the recently beaten or deposed or whatever you want to call it, a former state legislator is no longer a state legislator. Kurt Nisley was actually declared public enemy number one by the party because he was revealing what happened during the closed door sessions, the committees, the committees and caucuses. He was actually telling his constituents, hey, here's, this person said this happened, and it was. So anytime there are closed door secret meetings, regardless of what the elected Republicans claim they're for, anytime there are secret meetings, we the people are kept out of the loop. And so I'm in favor of more transparency. We have a question.
Yeah.
Gardenia Flower said, is there a time during the convention regular delegates can ask Julie McGuire questions, since she only decided to run for office just as the window to sign up was closing?
So no, it won't be during the convention proper. It won't be during the Saturday meeting. During the Saturday meeting, it's all a very scheduled show, so to speak. But if you're coming the night before on Friday, there will be opportunities to go and talk to all of the candidates. Each one of them has a hospitality suite, and they all have after parties after all the convention festivities officially end. There's the lieutenant governor candidates, and there's also other politicians from around the state that they have their own events. So it's a good time to go and get to know some of our elected officials.
Absolutely. And Jim O'Rourke would like to know, how do you get the things that you've been talking about? How do you get these raised without interference?
Very, very important. Okay, so there's a number of aspects to this. So number one, this is the proper procedure. There's a proper procedure for how you approach these things. The convention, while it has not been functioning the way that it could for many years, and this is all according to the rules, by the way. It's just because nobody's spoken up and said anything about it until.
And I think I want to just have you pause real quick right there, because I think that's really important. A lot of delegates may be under the impression that you're trying to change the rules, or you're trying to kind of sidestep some stuff. No, you actually looked up what the official rules for this convention are, and based on those rules, you're wanting to introduce some form of accountability for the politicians.
Absolutely. We're not really advocating for a rule change. We're just using the already appropriate system that exists. It's changing how we normally do things out of. I want to say convention, but that would be a little confusing. Tradition. Let's say tradition.
There you go. Yep.
Traditionally, our conventions in Indiana. Again, I will restate. In other states around the country, this is how they function. There are floor debates, there's points of order, there's motions, and all that stuff. But we are breaking with tradition a little bit here. However, this is the process. There is a process to get these things heard. You, as a delegate, have certain rights as a member of the most powerful governing authority in the state party. Again, some of you guys may have tuned in a little later. Before I was saying, the state party rules themselves make this clear that all the authority of the state party derives from the convention. The Republican convention, duly assembled every every 2 years, and that is Rule 1-1 in the state party rules. If you can look that up on the Indiana GOP website. And by the way, I am a little concerned that me bringing this up, they're going to try to hide it and change that in the future when nobody's looking. However, I would make the argument that they cannot change the rule. The state committee cannot change rules that would undermine the authority of the convention without the convention's consent, because the convention is the highest governing authority. So any rule that they make that would hinder the delegates' rights to change rules and things like that would be against the original intent of the document, and that would make them void. But we're kind of getting in the weeds there. Point being is, you as a delegate are actually a member of the highest, the body with the highest authority in the party. Yes. Subject to the Republican Party of the state of Indiana in the state convention duly assembled. The state committee is the supreme party authority in this state. Subject to the Republican Party of the state.
Exactly. And I think that's really important. It's right there. And this is, just so everyone's aware, this is indiana.gop. This is the official party website. And Rule 1-1, as he stated, the state convention duly assembled. The state committee is the supreme party authority in this state and a permanent political body continuous from year to year. Committee has full power to adopt all necessary rules for the governance and regulation of party affairs.
Yes. And this is an important distinction between the state committee and the convention. A convention by definition is a temporary body. So they as soon as they adjourn, as soon as the convention adjourn, your term as delegate is over.
Right.
And then they re-choose all the delegates again the next time.
And then it goes into further details, but
that's the important one.
The important part is serving as a delegate is extremely important, and it's an extremely powerful position.
It's a way that you can direct the vision and mission of the party. Like, this is the reason we have these conventions, is because, they want to get people from around the state to get together and talk and determine the course of action for the next session.
Okay, so Dwayne asks, are you going to get to discussing the 4 proposed resolutions? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll start with the legislative one. Again, these copies were sent to everyone via email, but we're going to bring them up on screen. And if there's a particular question that you have about any of them, that's why we're having this.
Yep. So which one do we want to start with? We start with the rule changes. You should definitely have Dr. Dan Stock on your show. He'd love to come on and explain a lot of this stuff. He did the majority of the writing on this one. He wasn't a delegate. He lost, but he has people that are delegates that are presenting this resolution. So maybe I should give a little background on this.
Please.
So over the past few years, a lot of the conservative activists in the legislature or that have been working with legislators to try to get certain bills passed have run into a lot of roadblocks that they feel like there shouldn't have been, given the seriousness of the issues they're bringing up to the conservative base. One example, are you aware of the Kinsey Institute, Dion?
I've heard of it, but I am not.
Boy, we're about to open a can of worms here.
Okay.
So Alfred Kinsey in the 1950s was what they now term a sexologist. He was part of the research push that brought us the modern, the sexual revolution, and a lot of the perverse ideas about sex that our modern culture engages in were the result of a lot of the stuff that he was doing at at Indiana University in Bloomington.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so these included basically pedophilia under the guise of research.
Yeah. Now I remember. Now I know what you're talking about. Is that the one that had the twins? Sets of twins.
That was John Money, I believe.
Okay.
But they're all connected. Okay. And I'm not the person who's the expert on all the details of it, but I can give you a contact of somebody who you should have on if you want to talk about that stuff more. It can get it's definitely adults only.
Right.
But in any case, we were funding this. We were funding this through our tax dollars. We were paid taxes, and then the Indiana University gets all this tax money that they would spend on these ridiculous and perverse institution that was the Kinsey Institute. And so a few years ago, Representative John Jacob, who's one of the tag team that the HRCC spent over $500,000 in each race to remove them. For some context, those races are usually like $50,000 to $100,000 or so for the general election too. And this was $500,000 a piece spent in the primary. In any case,
right.
The John Jacob came up with one of these amendments, and it may actually, it was probably, I think I know who originated it, and believe that was Rhonda Miller with Purple for Parents. They decided, hey, they've been funding this institute, which we should never have given any money to in the first place. Let's take it out of the budget.
Okay.
And so they submitted that amendment. I don't think it ever ended up getting called on the floor because they had so many things going on. But eventually, Representative Larissa Sweet out of, I believe it's Wabash County, she decided to take that and run with it. And she finally called this up for a vote on the budget bill, I believe, in 2022. And so finally, we got this vote to defund the Kinsey Institute, to remove the funding from this source of perversion in our state that we were all paying for with our tax money. And so this actually brings up a very important point about the legislature for some of you who don't watch and follow how all this works. A lot of the time, they don't have roll call votes. So, if you're watching C-SPAN and they have everybody's names up on the thing, seeing if which way they voted, well, they don't always do it that way. And part of the reason is because historically, before we had all the technology, it was very cumbersome to take a roll call vote. But nowadays, we don't really have that. They don't have that excuse anymore because technology allows them to just press a button from their desk and it just goes right up there. So one of the things in this is trying to deal with this kind of stuff to bring some transparency to the process. And one of these rule changes that's being suggested by that group, which I formerly sat as the board president on that organization, but one of those rules was to mandate roll call votes so that they can't hide. Because, for example, this Kinsey Institute amendment was fought in the caucus. Our Republican caucus fought against defunding the Kinsey Institute, if you can believe it. There were two. Yep.
I was just going to say, which tells you a lot.
Yeah. There were actually two that publicly voted against defunding it. That was Peggy Mayfield and Edward Clare. Ed Clare is the one that everybody loves to hate because he's really a super liberal Republican. But Peggy Mayfield was, I think, a surprise to a lot of people. She may have had other reasons for voting against it, but I don't think that really excuses her.
Sure. So the basic rundown of this is to bring some accountability and to ensure, because one of the things that we've seen in the legislature is the committee chair for these various committees decides what gets heard and what doesn't, and they can table it and they can make it disappear. They can choose to actually have it heard. So it's essentially, I want to call people's attention to number 2 here. All bills filed shall have an accompanying discharge petition that, when signed by 40% of a committee, subcommittee, or of the entire chamber, shall obligate the committee chairman to hold a hearing on said bill in a timely fashion to permit its passage in the ongoing session.
Yep.
Essentially, it's forcing votes because the majority, or it's forcing votes because enough people actually want it heard.
Yep. So that one, it's not just about the committee chairs. It's also about the Speaker of the House and in the Senate. It's the pro tempore. And so basically, what happens is just kind of like the standing rules of the convention. In order to facilitate efficient business, a lot of discretion is given to the chair of the assembly, which is the Speaker of the House or the Senate pro tem. And so these rules they functionally take some of the authority of individual legislators and then hand it off to the speaker so that to facilitate efficiency. Remember that's the efficiency of business being conducted and the rights of members are very often opposing each other. A lot of these things exist in tension, and that's something we all have to keep in mind. It's not always an expression of tyranny when they give discretion to somebody, because if they didn't sometimes give discretion, nothing would ever get done. So that's important to keep in mind.
Sure. But the essential takeaway from that part, I think, is currently the way that it's set up, the committee itself, the committee and subcommittee has no power over who the chair is. The chair is decided and picked by outside entity, usually the Speaker pro tem or the Speaker of the House.
The Speaker picks all the committee chairs. Generally serve at the pleasure of the Speaker or the Senate pro tem, and so therefore, if the Speaker wants to kill a bill, he'll send it to a committee where he knows that the committee chair is going to do what he wants.
Right.
And kill the bill that he wants killed. And that in the past, that's included bills like the resolution to end the COVID shutdown, for example, the bill that has been proposed the last few years by Senator Mike Young to end property tax on homesteads in a fiscally responsible way, I might add. This was a budget neutral bill. So remember, if you're hating your property taxes, remember our Republican Senate pro tem sent that to a committee where it died.
Right. And again, I want to reiterate for those of you who maybe are like, well, I don't know. I kind of like the way it is. This isn't about whether you agree or disagree with the particular resolution. It's about whether we, as the convention delegates, should have the opportunity to vote on whether or not this becomes part of the platform. You could be completely against it, but for example, if I was completely against it, I would still love to have a debate and have the opportunity to decide the future of the Republican Party.
That's and let me just make clarification. This isn't
Sure.
the platform. The platform is only in midterm years, which is why we're doing these as resolutions. And they do serve similar purposes, but I just would want to clarify that. But
yeah, absolutely.
But on your point about the debate, I personally texted Roderick Bray, the Senate pro tem, and I said, hey, Roderick, I realize that there's certain things that some people don't understand about what happens behind the scenes as the leader of the Senate. Please, please, please come and use this as an opportunity to debate these people and make your case. Make your case, because there are things that both sides don't understand about the other. And sometimes what helps us to come to a better understanding of each other is having these times when we all get up and each side gets to make their case, and then people think about it. This is going to be, I think if this pans out, it's going to be an educational experience for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
On both sides.
Sure, absolutely. So this is the resolution instructing Republicans and the Indiana General Assembly to amend chamber rules to increase accountability to their constituents. That's one of four. The second one, resolution instructing the Republican caucus of the Indiana General Assembly to acknowledge in law the right to refuse any and all medical interventions.
Oh, I was a big part of writing this one, so I can probably talk more on the exact language of this. So one thing that I want to stress about how I've approached the resolutions that I've played a major part in writing them is I've really tried to rely on foundational, fundamental principles of law, which are expressed primarily in our Constitution. As we talked about a little bit last time when I was on, most the rights that are expounded upon in the Constitution are not they pre-exist the Constitution. They predate the Constitution. The Constitution is only drawing attention to them. So, for example, okay, well, it says it right here in the language. Okay, so the Fourth Amendment and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution and substantially similar provisions in the Indiana Constitution acknowledge and protect the liberty interests of the people from infringements, both general and particular. So these amendments protect your general right to liberty, and this right to liberty is something that comes from God, not from government.
Right.
And so
right.
The Constitution and the Bill of Rights particularly lays out this as one of these rights that we acknowledge, not one that the Constitution grants, but one that the Constitution acknowledges.
Right. The entire purpose is to limit government's infringement upon already existing or inalienable God-given rights.
And that bears out in the Ninth Amendment, which is in the next section, which is exactly what I'm talking about, how it says that basically the rights listed in the Constitution are not an exhaustive list. There are other rights that aren't mentioned in the Constitution that you still possess. And this is something that I've learned from, paying attention to some of the stuff that's going on in Boone County. There's this guy, his name's Jaron Jackson. He lives in Oklahoma. And at first, when I started hearing these guys in Boone County talking about this, I was a little suspicious because it seems like it draws a lot of parallels to what I think some people would call like a sovereign citizen kind of movement. If you guys aren't familiar, when most people hear the word sovereign citizen, they're thinking, oh, it's those guys that don't have driver's licenses and think they're above the law. Well, the thing because when they started doing all this and talking about it, I really started trying to figure out why do people keep doing this? Because it's not just one person, it's a pattern. And so I started really digging into these sovereign citizen movements. And I think the general theme that I came out of this at realizing was this is a response to our governments becoming very far from the original intent of how they're supposed to operate. And some of the people in these groups, they don't necessarily understand how to properly express this, and they get completely steamrolled when they show up in court and start talking about some of these things because they don't really understand what they're saying. They're just trying to repeat something they were told.
Right.
But the people that really know what they're doing with it, they're appealing to these fundamental constitutional rights that predate the Constitution, and they have enough of a deep understanding of these things to be able to accurately express how the particular thing is in violation of the Constitution. And there's very few people that actually can pull that off. But
But I think in this case, and just so everyone's aware, I'm going to do my very best to get the point across, but I got to be really, really careful. Being on YouTube and other platforms, as we know, censorship is running rampant and you're not allowed to tell the truth. So the basic gist of it, I actually had a video taken down because I emphasized for religious exemptions. That's how ridiculous it's gotten. So what this does essentially is guarantee the rights of the people to be free from medical experimentation.
Yep. That's exactly what this one does. It's specific. And so all these whereas statements, let's actually talk a little bit about the structure of a typical resolution, because that might help a little understanding. So typically there's two parts to a resolution. There's the preamble, which is all the whereas statements. And that's basically describing why this is necessary. Like, it's the rationale for why we're taking the action. And then there's the resolution at the end where it's the invocation to go do something. It's an exhortation, or in our case, we think, we're trying to convey that us as the Republican Party of the state of Indiana, we're directing our legislatures to, or our elected officials to implement this policy, because we believe, not because we believe that we just want this policy, but we're appealing to this constitutional authority that this is already our right.
Right.
We're not asking you to do something that you're already that is abnormal. We're actually calling you back to what the standard is, which is the Constitution.
So I will say on this one, I'm really, really torn, and I would love to have an open debate on the floor, because I am 100% in favor of number one, and I am 100% in favor of number three. But I think number two is open for debate, because I'm very much, businesses should be allowed to do what they want kind of thing to a degree, but I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I think, again, it's one of those things where I would love to have a good, solid, fact-based debate on the floor and be able to hear from both sides and what they have to say.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of thing. What we're hoping for is that the legislature will get the big picture and implement this stuff, and then they will have that argument on the floor of the House.
Right.
Like, that's the place to have that argument. What we really want is for them to get the big picture that these rights are guaranteed under the Constitution, and we need to implement the Constitution, because there is a sworn duty. There's one of these sections here, actually, which discusses this. So every one of your government officials has sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution.
Yes.
Every one of them. And that's in the Constitution, that they're required to do that. Mm-hmm. And so we're actually just saying, hey, fulfill the oath that you swore.
Right. And remember, it does get brought up from time to time, but the Supreme Court has already ruled, Marbury v. Madison, that any law repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. Amen. Which means it doesn't exist. It needs to be tossed. And those who are actually ensuring that this law is getting carried out are guilty of violating their oath of office. It gets actually quite deep. But this here is about the taxation of one's homestead, which is your home.
Yep.
So I'm fully in favor of getting rid of taxes, personally, completely. That was one thing that I really liked about Suzanne Crouch's platform. But let's start here. We have a question here. Let's see. Dwayne asks, aren't you afraid of polio, measles, etc., running wild in our public schools without the shots, especially with schools being overrun with migrants' children from who knows where? I'm just going to say real quick, Dwayne, when people who are allowed to enter this country illegally are required to have particular medical interventions, then I will consider allowing it to be performed upon citizens of this country. Until and unless those criteria are met, I don't think that that's a conversation to even be had.
So I'd just like to respond to that. And yeah. I'm not fully informed on all the nuances of that argument. However, there is significant people that really know all the research on it tell me that there's certain vaccines which the costs and the benefits are not as clear as they would have you believe. And some history on this, in the 80s, there was a push.
Well, I got to stop you right there. It's
okay.
I would love to debate. And you know what? If you would like to come back and do like a Rumble only type of thing, I am absolutely 100% pro free speech. But I've already got a couple of strikes because I let people go on a little too long. So
let me just say this. The fact that we are having this conversation right now, Dwayne, should tell you something about how this works.
And Gardenia says, Dwayne, I think this is a good point and would be great to hear in debate. And I think that's the point, is allowing us the opportunity to discuss this and say, well, okay, Dwayne, for example, made a phenomenal point. Is this a blanket statement, or is this only for certain risk v reward type situations, modern or older prescriptions, things like that? It's a valid question.
And so I don't know if Dwayne is a delegate, but this is the kind of thing where if we were having a proper debate that you could bring up and you could say, well, every member of the assembly has a right to debate at least one time on each motion under the traditional rules. It sometimes gets abbreviated in a convention setting, but this is the kind of thing where in a deliberative assembly, every member has a right to put their 2 cents in, because when we all have different perspectives, and when we put those all together, hopefully we'll arrive at the best decision, the right exceptions, the right aggregate decision for what the choice at hand should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this particular case here, we're talking about having to pay taxes on your homestead. There are several fundamental problems with even charging taxes, but anyone losing their home because they're unable to pay the government for a home they already own is unconscionable. And it's something that has to change. So in this, I'm looking, oh, there it is. Okay. So therefore be it resolved that the Indiana Republican Party in convention hereby instructs its Republican elected officials in the legislature and the executive branch to eliminate the unconstitutional, unjust, and unconscionable taxation of one's homestead. And instructed to have this resolution read in full at its first meetings of the 2025 legislative session. I'm personally in favor of that. It's been brought up on multiple occasions. Well, let's have veterans exempt, or let's have seniors exempt, or we can't do that because the Indiana Constitution does not allow any laws that target a group. If the only way to do this is a blanket removal.
There's also another argument there that if they were to do that and it would be allowed, that they would just completely forget about the issue, because the largest portion of the electorate is elderly people. And so if they take care of that, there's not going to be as much push to actually do the right thing on this. That's just a pragmatic argument.
And it's sad that that's the case, but I myself, even if, like, for example, I think of my grandmother who's on a very fixed income and, has to pay taxes on a home that she's owned for, longer than I've been alive. It's ridiculous.
Paying rent to the government for the right to own your house.
Exactly. It's part of the American dream to own your home. And if you have to continually pay every year to the government for the right to live there, you don't own it. You're renting it or leasing it. Yep. This next one, let's face it, hot topic in 2020, and is still right at the top of the mind of a lot of not just Republicans, but people across the nation. And that is secure and trustworthy elections. How can we ensure that our elections are both secure and trustworthy?
Yep. So generally speaking, I think that the biggest argument for, going back to, the older way of doing elections is really just a matter of trust. There's all kinds of arguments about the specifics of the vulnerabilities in different machine setups and different systems. But the way that we used to do elections, if you wanted to fudge the results, you had to go physically on site to a particular precinct and then, actually stuff a ballot box.
Right.
Now,
and this is Just real quick, this is a topic actually that my wife and I disagree on. She's all for the electronic use because it makes it easier, it's faster, it's she believes it's more secure. I, on the other hand, believe that proper security with paper ballots, that being watermarked or other security methods, are more secure than a machine, because at least with paper ballots, you are able to see physical representations. With the electronic side of things can happen behind the scenes. And we've seen many, many demonstrations as to the vulnerability of various machines.
Yeah, and so part of that, it's also the fact that technology is a huge force multiplier. So whereas in order to manipulate the results of an election on the scale of, say a national election like the president, it takes far fewer people involved to organize, to mount an attempt to do something like that now with all these electronics than it would have in like the 1800s, because because of the technology involved and the fact that in bigger cities they tend to have vote centers where you can vote at any location, and that requires the e-poll books, which so you can don't make sure people don't vote twice. You have to have a constantly updating online record of who's voted and who hasn't, and that's how if you're trying to approach making sure the numbers don't look too off, like say there's more votes than people that have voted on register, then you would have to know that information of who's voted and who hasn't. So there's lots of, and I'm not, again, a lot of these resolutions, I'm not the expert on them. I'm just kind of the person that's putting it together in the proper form and trying to make sure that these people have their chances to make their case to the assembly. We're trying to get these people who are working really hard, trying to get people elected, trying to push our legislators to fix things that a lot of us already think need to happen, and we're trying to give them a platform.
Okay, so real quick, what can delegates do? We're watching this, we're learning about this, okay, I'm in favor of at least allowing an open debate on the floor. What do I do as a delegate to ensure that happens?
So you can sign my petition, which, have you included the link on the YouTube one today?
I think so. If not, you can see the previous video, or it should be in the email you all received as a delegate.
Yeah. I mean, if you can, the easier you make it for people, the better. But yeah, so there's a petition going around that you can sign. That can help. You can show up to the Rules Committee meeting on Friday at 3:30 in room 125. Delegates only are allowed in there. They're not. No one else is allowed.
No guests.
Yep. Yeah, no guests. It's probably going to be a cramped meeting anyway, so they're probably wanting to keep out people that don't have a right to participate in that discussion. You can show up there, and also you can email the state party and tell them you would love to see this happen. You can email secretary@indiana.gop. That's indiana.gop. I know it's funky, isn't it? But yeah, secretary@indiana.gop.
Okay, so yeah, Jim O'Rourke, hard stop for him. See you down there, Jim. I'm a delegate, so hope to see you down there Friday and Saturday.
Hope to see you at the Rules Committee meeting.
Absolutely. I will definitely be at the Rules Committee meeting. And so right here, I think is a really important aspect of this, right?
Sure. Especially for the guy who was talking about how what we're trying to do here, what the procedure was. I forget exactly what the question was, but so there's a proper procedure to do all of this. What we do is generally in a large deliberative body, they will assign committees, and those committees' jobs are to focus on certain aspects of the business in detail, to then do all the detail work so that we can bring it up to the assembly and not have as much uncertainty and discussion when it gets to that point. And so by the time it gets to the full assembly, most of the details are worked out.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And this is simply, I guess, a request to amend the current agenda or to make sure that time is included on the agenda for the very things that we're talking about here, these resolutions.
Yeah.
Right?
So last time around, most of the people involved did go to the resolutions committee meeting, by the way. Most of this actually did go in front of the committee. That they just denied them, which is improper for a number of reasons, but that's irrelevant to this right now. So the point here is we're trying to do all the work for them here. I've laid out the schedule, and I've laid out the procedures for debate, and then the rules committee is supposed to look at this, determine, is it plausible? Is it is there any unsure things that we still have to figure out, and hopefully present it to the assembly and say, this is what we recommend for the rules of the convention. And so they introduce these rules to the entire convention, and that right there is the point at which last time Ken Colbert called his point of order, because there was a particular rule that he disagreed with, which was giving the chair the authority to not hear their amendments that they wanted to propose to the platform. And so this particular, we're just trying to lay out all the details for them, and the appropriate procedure is we make a motion to the convention to do something. All a motion is a request for the body or the decision-making authority to take a certain action. It's the same way if you're in court. In court, you can file motions, and what you're doing is you're asking the judge to do something, to order something.
Okay, so you go in front of the rules committee, for example. You get the opportunity to present this information to the rules committee.
Yep.
And then what happens? Does the rule committee take a vote from the delegates? Do they simply decide among themselves? Like, what's the procedure there?
So here's the procedure. The rules committee will vote to either recommend the rule. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, they recommend some set of rules. As far as mine is concerned, it's only a motion to add these rules into the existing document. And considering that the other rules have not been promulgated, and I haven't been able to see a copy of them, they will have the responsibility of doing the work to ensure that all of this meshes properly, assuming that they agree to incorporate all this. So the motion is carefully constructed so that the body makes a clear action when they approve the motion. And so, yeah.
So does all of this come down to whether or not the rules committee decides yeah or no on this?
So the rules committee, assuming they say yes, great, we're golden. They'll put it on the schedule and everybody's going to be prepared to speak. If they don't, however,
yeah, what happens then, and what can we as delegates do to change their minds?
Okay, so technically, the committee is only an organ of the body. Okay, remember, we're thinking about the convention as a body. We're the Republican convention. You need to think about the organization as one cohesive whole. It's just like when you start looking into like legally what a company is, it's a person. It's a fictitious legal person. Okay, and the organization of the Republican Party likewise can be thought of as a body. And so the committees are all responding directly to the authority of the body. They're all under the complete authority of the convention. And so what that means is that any decision that they make can be appealed to the body. So if I don't like their decision, I can ask the entire convention for a vote under the typical conventions of parliamentary procedure.
Because according to Rule 1-1, the state committee is subject to the state convention duly assembled.
Yep. But actually, in this case, it's more about the relationship between the committee and the convention, because the convention makes the committee. Well, actually, never mind. I guess I'm going to get in the weeds here, but the the rules committee is created by statute or by the rules of the Republican Party, and then but yeah, it's still subject to the convention. So
right, and then it's created a certain way as provided for in an alternate, location. What's that?
It's always a question of where the authority flows, where the authority is derived from.
Right. But back to this motion here.
Sure.
It essentially asking for the opportunity to have the debate on each of these topics lasting 20 minutes each.
Yep. 10 minutes aside.
10 minutes per side. And then during the actual, this is during the rules committee, and then during the actual, I guess,
so
convention itself. Go ahead.
The number one is just the schedule. Everything else is additional rules that are relevant. So this is a pretty important point here. What we discovered in our meeting with the state party is that Robert's rules does not apply in the convention. It only applies to the committees. And what that means isn't that it's only the state rules. What it means is that in the deliberative process, it defers to just common conventions of parliamentary procedure, which is a little more of a gray area. And so in this suggestion, I invoked Robert's rules because what they were trying to say is there's no rules now. That means it's only the state party rules. But the problem is a convention is a very particular thing, and there's other rules that make it obvious that there is a process for deliberation involved here. And so it really just means it's more ambiguous. And honestly, I think that makes the chairman's job harder. So we just suggested that they do this.
Okay. So basically, we'd like to see this stuff follow Robert's Rules of Order, even though it's normally not the I guess legalese that's being used.
It still would follow typical parliamentary procedure, and that's a very important point. It's just kind of like the relationship between statute and common law. So there's commonly established legal principles that aren't ever written in statute that we just accept, and most judges would agree with. Just axioms, like there's what's the word I'm looking for? It's escaping me right now. But there's legal principles that are just going to be the same no matter where you are and what time.
Right. And general rules of decorum, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right?
And so decorum is just what you can and can't say while you're debating. So generally you can't speak on something that isn't relevant. It's called germaneness. And this is something they called John Jacob on all the time when he was in the State House, because he was still learning a lot of the stuff and nobody was teaching him, because he got kicked out of caucus before he even got a chance to be a participant in the legislature. This was before the session even started. They kicked him out. Bad move.
Yeah. And look, it regardless of how you feel about John Jacob, because I know there are some who maybe feel like he went too far, or there was some theatrics involved, or whatever. Bear in mind that, like you said, he got kicked out of places immediately, and no one thought to actually teach him about how things work down there.
I think it would have been a lot more orderly if they hadn't kicked him out of caucus immediately. I think that was a really bad move.
But so what we're looking for, or I should say what you're looking for, your group, is to have this read in full before the debate and not dispensed with unless by a vote of the assembly after a motion and a second. So in other words, they can't just gavel it away. What you're looking for is something essentially on paper that says, we want the opportunity to present this resolution to have hearty, healthy debate, and it doesn't go away until the delegates actually vote on it. And if it gets voted down by a majority, fine, done deal, moving on, right?
Yep. And one of the reasons I wrote that in there, which it's already kind of technically mentioned, that's how it's supposed to be in Roberts, I believe. But the reason I specified that is because one of the things we're really trying, the ideological warfare here that we're playing is we're trying to expose people to a lot of these constitutional principles that we're talking about. Because to be just frank, most people don't really understand their Constitution. Even the attorneys don't even understand the Constitution a lot of the time. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I would argue that there are many, unfortunately, far too many judges, attorneys, law enforcement officers who have at best flawed, at worst completely incorrect view of the Constitution, such as the belief that the Bill of Rights grants rights. It does not.
Do you have your Indiana Constitution handy?
I can bring it up.
I got a note on this real quick if you can pull it up.
Sure.
Because I got a great story about my experience with the Supreme Court. This will be a good one.
Let's see here. This should be.
Yeah, I think, yep, there it is. That's where I always go to. Go to Article 1, Section 12. That's in Indiana's state Bill of Rights. So just like our federal Constitution has a Bill of Rights, so does our state Constitution. And that says, all courts shall be open, and every person for injury done to him in his person, property, or reputation shall have remedy by due course of law. Justice shall be administered freely and without purchase, completely and without denial, speedily and without delay. Okay, so when it says justice shall be administered freely and without purchase, what do you think it means?
It means it shouldn't cost anything.
It shouldn't cost anything. That's what I agree. I would agree to that too. Well, unfortunately, the Supreme Court in Indiana disagrees with you. They believe, and this was the opinion they wrote when I pushed this, that they say that phrase means that you aren't allowed to bribe judges for a favorable result. So here's the story. Here's the story.
Yeah, that's very, very. That's an interesting interpretation and one.
So
I don't quite understand
the story, and I think it'll make more sense. So we had a situation with DCS not that long ago. We took our baby to the hospital because the doctor said she had unusual bruising and she needed to get tested out for certain blood clotting disorders. We take her there, and then they say that the bruising is evidence of abuse. They take her for 3 weeks, and we have to deal with DCS in this whole ridiculous thing for 3 weeks without our kid.
Wow.
An absolutely ridiculous situation, which, by the way, is part of why I'm so involved in this sort of thing.
That makes sense. Yeah, the literal definition of the word purchase, number one, acquire something by paying for it,
The
aka buy.
1800s version of the dictionary agrees with that too.
Yeah.
So in any way, I appealed the decision that they removed her under the grounds that that they did it without a probable cause, because I didn't think they had probable cause, because the doctor that made the statement wasn't even in the hospital and did it all over the phone.
Fair enough.
Another crazy thing. Maybe we can talk about that later. But so I appealed.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back by the way, I'd love to have you on for your typical candidate interview for running.
Sure.
That's one of the things I do on the show. I try to interview candidates for office. But the last motion to amend the standing rules of the 2024 Indiana Republican Convention to include items on the agenda and prescribing a process for debate. This talks about also the voting procedure, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, can I just finish that one note? Sure. I can get to the point real quick before we wrap that up. You mind if I do that? I just want to say, basically, the fundamental story here is I discovered this passage before I did the appeal. And when the appeal happened, I decided to ask the court to overrule the court fees, because I believe that what this section says is that court filing fees are unconstitutional. And I took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And then they came back at me with this ridiculous argument that it actually means you're just not supposed to bribe a judge, which is like, that's due process includes that, not purchase.
Right.
Anyway, let me we can wrap that up now. I just wanted to make sure I finished that.
Sure. I get it. This is
the point of the fact that the government is not abiding by the Constitution, and that's why we're doing this.
Right. And it's a simple symptom of a much larger problem, which I talk about on my show all the time. And that is how our government has been, essentially co-opted by people who do not have the interests of the people at heart anymore. And this is one way to ensure that we bring accountability back to our government. We, as duly elected or appointed, even delegates of one of the two most powerful political parties in the most powerful country on the face of the planet, we have to step up and start doing our part. And this is something that we can do, is at minimum ensure that we have the opportunity to have an open, honest dialogue and the opportunity to vote whether or not yay or nay we want something like this. You may not agree with everything, and that's what the debate is for, and that's what the vote is for.
Amen.
So this talks about the actual election proceedings and how it works. So this here would say we don't want the barcode scanning.
Yep.
Let's just do the check boxes and get the ID, visually verify, and then do the hole punch method. That seemed to work fine last time. I don't. They're saying, hole punch store listing, Staples, $5.99 each. I mean, Walmart, $1.50.
Let me explain this really quick because it's an important point. What these committees would do if we didn't just lay it out for them is be like, well, we can't do that. It's tomorrow morning. We don't have time to do this. And I'm just showing them, hey, we will literally go to Walmart for you and buy the hole punches for $1.52 a piece. How many do you really need? 10?
Right.
Be $15 in somebody's gas in somebody's car. We're going to make this happen. We're not going to, we're not unduly burdening you. Let's just make sure we can approve this to happen, because otherwise people aren't going to trust the results. And if just 1% doesn't trust the results, goes back and tells everybody it was a sham, how much does that undermine the trust in our system? That is the important part. We have to conduct elections in a way that fosters trust in those elections. Otherwise, if we don't have trust in our institutions, everything will just devolve into anarchy. That's what happens around the world, and we're no different. We're not that special. We need to make sure that we fix this before it gets worse.
And that's really the heart of the matter here. And this is what your group, the group you represent, that's what you're asking, is the opportunity at minimum to be able to have a floor debate, both sides tell their side, and then we as delegates can decide yay or nay. That's all it is.
And let me explain. I want to explain something about that particular thing real quick.
Sure.
So I'm not of the idea that everybody in the state party is out to get us, okay? Because there's very good people that work there that care about the future of our country. I think how a lot of this stuff happens is, number one, there's no communication between the people running the state party organization and the grassroots. And number two, these people are a lot more comfortable with, contracting stuff out and technology. They've hired a contractor to conduct these elections. So they probably were shopping around and said, oh, well, these guys, we like their bid, and they kept getting back to us, so we're going to hire them to conduct the election. Well, they have a certain way that they run the election, and that involves the scanners. Well, that's probably how that happened. It's probably no one that was being sneaky and trying to fudge the election and stuff. But regardless, there's lots of people that aren't going to think about it that way, and lots of people that don't know that. And even if, we say that's probably what happened, maybe it is a little sketchy. We just want to not have to ask those questions. We can do it simply. We can do the hole punch. End of story. It's that easy. So is the trust in our elections worth, messing up the system a little bit? I think so.
Right. I genuinely, I gave it a lot of thought, I guess, is the short version. And it's like, how much time do you gain by scanning an ID versus, punching a hole in it?
And how much money do they spend on that equipment?
Right. And of course, that's another thing, because the cost of our elections, even at the delegates, we paid our fees, but ultimately, how much of that is getting utilized? How much of the money for the state party is going to technology versus candidates, versus getting good people elected? And more importantly, ensuring that we, the people, are being represented in Indianapolis.
I would completely agree with you there.
So, delegates, ladies and gentlemen that are just, happen to be watching this, that may or may not be involved at all, if you have any further questions, or you for whatever reason you can't find the form, you can't find the document, you can email Joseph himself at joseph@bortka.com. It's right there on the screen. Or you can email me and simply say, hey, can you send me this letter so I can sign it? The more people that respond, the more people that say, hey, I want at least the opportunity to hear this, the more likely the state party is to go, yeah, we probably should do that to keep, the people who keep this party running. Yeah, especially if you're an elected delegate versus an appointed, and there's nothing wrong with being an appointed delegate, but your elected delegates, those are the people that most likely are going to get elected again. And if you make them angry, you're going to be in for a hard time. So I think the state party is much more likely to listen the more signatures there are on a particular document.
Yep. Agree 100%. And if any of you guys watching this are, state party officials or, elected officials with some sway with the party, if what we've said today makes sense to you and you agree with us, talk to people on the back end there. And say, these guys are being reasonable and we just want to have a debate. That's all, help us out here a little bit. We'd appreciate it.
And I will say, the point about 2022, I think the big issue, and, I could be wrong, but I think the big issue was it was just there. There was no preamble. It was just, here we go. This is what we want. And let's face it, up until that point, everything had been kind of regular, right? We've always done it this way. I hear that all the time from, elected officials. Well, why don't we do it this way? Well, we've always done it this other way, right? As a matter of fact, that's a big problem here in my county, is we've always done it this way. We've always done it this way.
It's like property tax, which actually hasn't always been that way. It was 1913 when they started property tax. Before that, we didn't have any property tax.
Right. The prime example. But it can be hard to suddenly change things. And I, just like you, I don't believe that every person, that happens to be elected or happens to be in the state party is, out to screw the people. I think that there are a lot of good people in many cases who may not even realize how much power they have, or maybe have a flawed understanding of the way that the party is operating these days. Most of these people do this, and I firmly believe this. Most people are good. Most people do this because their heart's in the right place. Once they get there, things can change. But in general, it takes we, the people, to demand accountability, transparency, and most important, transformation to the world that we want and the state that we want. We can't affect the world without affecting our local and our state level.
Yep. Ask questions, educate yourself. I think I said this when I was on last time, but you have access to the most powerful tool for educating yourself that anyone in human history has ever had, and that is the internet.
Precisely.
Understand these procedures, understand your rights, understand the Constitution, and, it will pay dividends.
Absolutely, 100%. So again, just one more time, all they're asking is for an opportunity to have this heard and an opportunity to have a debate. If you have any further questions, concerns, you have another appearance on another show.
Yes,
tomorrow again, right?
Mouthwash. It's John Schmidt's show. He's out of Indianapolis. I'm going on there to do the same thing we're doing now. We're just going to talk about what's going on. We're going to talk about the resolutions, the plan to get the resolutions, and you'll have another opportunity to ask questions. So,
yep. And if for whatever reason you can't watch that show or you can't make it to that, again, Joseph standard spelling, at Bortka.com, or you can email me, talk@DionBergeron.com. It's on the screen, but it's DionBergeron.com. Talk@DionBergeron.com. And I'm more than happy to put you in touch, or more than happy to send you any of the documents that we've shown you here today. I don't have a dog in this fight, other than I want a more transparent, more focused Republican Party that is closer to the roots that I consider myself, which is a constitutional Republican, the way the Republican Party was designed when it was originally put together.
Amen. And just remember, if you want to help, sign that petition and show up to the Rules Committee meeting, 3:30, room 125 at the Convention Center, if you're a delegate.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joseph. We greatly appreciate your time. We're kind of long, but again, feel free to reach out, because we'd love to have you on the show, just as just talk about running for office down there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Joseph Bortka. He's looking to change the way that the Republican Party here in Indiana does things. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I don't necessarily agree with everything that are in the particular resolutions. There are a couple of finer points that I'm like, well, I don't know about that one. Or maybe, well, could we change the wording on that? And that's actually what happens in the floor debates, is they come to an opportunity to come to an agreement. This side tells their side, this side tells their side, and somewhere in the middle, they go, yeah, let's vote for this. And then there are amendments, and there are various things that happen. I think, if nothing else, the plan to do this is well laid out and takes into account everyone's best interests, and it gives an opportunity. They're not asking for all these things to be introduced as listed. They're asking for an opportunity to present them, hear from the opposing side, and then have you and me vote whether or not we want it. And I think that's the fundamental necessity that we're going to have to use moving forward. I love the little I guess it's buttons or other stuff. I'm a delegate, not a rubber stamp. And for a very long time, Indiana has simply looked at the delegates as rubber stamps to forward their agenda. I know it's been a long show, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm going to let you go. I hope you have a wonderful evening. And I hope you'll like this video, subscribe. I normally don't do this, but I think if you like this content and you like to know what's going on with our government, you like to know, especially here in the state of Indiana, but also nationally, follow me. We talk about this stuff all the time. And hopefully we'll have Mr. Bortka on again for his race. He's running again for District 100, which I'm not exactly sure where that is. I'm District 9, which is way up in the northwest corner. So I'm guessing southeast, the opposite end. I don't know for sure. We'll find out when he comes back on. I appreciate your time. I really, truly do. And the fact that you chose to spend this time here with us means the world to me. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, God bless you, God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, fulfilling evening. And I'll see, hopefully, all of you down there Friday and Saturday at the convention. Have a good night.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Sean Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.